everyone. Good evening, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about classroom management strategies. This is a very important topic in the world of education and definitely in teaching and learning. It's something that once you master it, you'll be able to do amazing things in your classroom. So I am Dr. Javan Jefferson. I am an assistant professor at Virginia State in the Department of Teaching and Learning, and my background is in K through 12 education. I was a special education teacher, then I was a special education department chair, compliance coordinator, and then I went on to be an administrator. I was an assistant principal for a little over 7 years in elementary, high school, and alternative education. So, what is classroom management? We always need some type of definition to ground our learning. So, classroom management is a variety of skills and techniques that teachers use to keep students organized and clear, focused, attentive, on task, and academically productive during class. And when these strategies are executed effectively, teachers are able to minimize behaviors that are going to possibly impede learning for both the individual students and groups of students, while maximizing behaviors that facilitate or enhance learning in the environment. So when you hear about classroom management, you'll hear classroom management plan and classroom management strategy. So the classroom management plan is what you write out for yourself, your overview that lists your classroom management strategy. So I'm going to give you guys a second to read the difference between a classroom management plan and a classroom management strategy, and then we'll discuss it briefly. All right, so again, your plan is the general overview of what you're going to do. It's your rules, it's your procedures, it's your guideline for when something happens in your classroom, this is how you handle it. And then the strategies are things that you actually put in place to handle that behavior or disruption or a student not being able to learn in your classroom. So that's the biggest difference between the plan and the strategy. The strategies make up the plan. So let's talk a little bit more about a classroom management plan. So it's an overall plan for developing an equitable and learning-centered classroom. So what is equitable? It's the classroom community where all students have an equal opportunity to learn and grow. And that's big in the field of education right now, making sure things are equitable. And then learning-centered classroom. When you are teaching, is your classroom teacher-led or student-led? That's a question that's going to be posed to you. So when you have a classroom community, learning is the focus of what you're doing in your classroom. It ensures that your students are growing, they're stretching their educational and academic muscle, and that they're able to do all of the things that you aim for them to do on grade level. So as a teacher, I believe in developing a classroom environment in which all are welcome as equal members of our community, all are respected, and all feel that they are in a safe place. Creating an environment requires a team effort. So that's myself as a teacher, as well as my students, and then those who are other participants in the school, the administrators, the instructional assistants, the secretaries, the custodians, the cafeteria workers, we all are a part of the community. So creating such an environment requires a team effort. Therefore, all members of our community, both students and teachers, will take responsibility for actively working to create that environment. We'll accomplish this by practicing the characteristics of kindness. So how do we define kindness? That's the quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate. So we should be aiming for kindness first before anything, another foundational characteristic. So kindness considers others first. It listens intently to their ideas, whether they agree with those ideas or not. It values the efforts of others. It responds with respect and patience. It does not act in anger. It willingly admits fault, and it's willing to make amends. So the daily do. So instead of in your classroom management plan listing don'ts. Let's list some of the things that you want our students to do. So every day, again, we want them to be kind, and we just define kindness. We want them to do something considerate for someone that requires them to give up something, i.e., energy, social status, time. We want them to listen to someone intently without judging them and try their best to understand what that person is saying and how they're feeling. So to identify with them. Find someone else's strength and tell them what it is. Admit a weakness to someone sincerely. So when it comes to fear or doubt or a mistake that you may have made, do something that you know you're not good at. Take the challenge. Ask someone for advice. And there are some other dues that you may add to your list based off of input from students, because we want to ensure that we have a democratic classroom. Here are some examples of classroom management plans, and I started with the elementary classroom first. So this is a good example of an elementary classroom management plan. You see it's very colorful, it's very short and concise. The sentences are easy to decipher and understand for an elementary student, and easy for you to be able to provide examples for them. So I'm going to give you a second to look over this plan. All right, so you see there are three categories. We're looking at the classroom basics, we're looking at working procedures, and hallway procedures. So classroom basics, how are you coming into the classroom? How do you order lunch? Very important for an elementary student. Where do you put your folder? They traditionally have homework folders, classwork folders, all types of folders in the elementary setting. How do you push in your chair? Where do you sit it on the rug? If adults are talking, what do you want them to do? Is it hips and lips? What's your little procedure for that? What are you doing a fire drill? So those are some classroom basics. Working procedures. How should you be working in the classroom? How do you use the materials at your table? How do you share materials with others? How do you change center activities? What are the classroom jobs? How do you clean up materials? What are the different noise levels for group work versus independent work? And then hallway procedures. How do we line up? How do we walk in the hallway? What side of the hallway do we walk on per our school PBIS policy? Where do we stop when we walk in the hallway? Ways to get into the important places, like if you need to go to the nurse, if you need to go to the office, etc. So these are some of the basics of a classroom management plan for the elementary setting. Here's another example of a classroom management plan that could be used overall for you in the elementary setting or the middle school setting. And the acronym for them for this plan is CHAMPS. So C, how will your students engage with each other during the activity? H, what's the process for seeking assistance or support? A, what type of learning structure or format is it? M, are learners permitted to move about the classroom? P, which behaviors demonstrate active learning? Or S, are students successful with their behavior for a task? Our third example is an example for a high school, and this is a tiered classroom management plan. So you see it has a guiding question at the top. What is the core behavioral curriculum provided? So how were these behavior expectations communicated to students through existing practices? So for tier one, you have high student engagement, you have response cards, core responding, peer tutoring, making sure the classroom is organized, clear communication. For tier two, the first line of intervention, we again have a guiding question. What interventions or additional behavior supports are in place? And for that, those strategies are changes to academic instruction, positive reinforcement system, token economy, behavior contracts, remedial intervention or tutoring support. And then tier three, that's our intense individualized interventions. Again, we have a guiding question. What individualized intensive behavior supports are drawn on for the most challenging of classroom behaviors? For those few students who demonstrate chronic challenging behaviors, what strategies are used? A functional behavior assessment, or FBA as we call it, or a behavior intervention plan, a BIP, self-monitoring strategies, daily student evaluation, social skills instruction. So I chose this specific example because I think it's important at all stages to be able to explain to your students what your classroom management plan is. That's imperative to the classroom management plan actually being implemented and working. And then I really appreciate it for this specific plan. It's clear and concise for a high school student by asking them guiding questions, which allows them to be reflective about what it is that they're showcasing in the classroom. And everything is outlined so that they understand what the expectation is and what strategies are going to be put in place to help them to eliminate that behavior so that they do not progress to the second or the third tier. And then lastly, START. So this classroom management plan talks about the structure, teaching, acknowledging, responding, and team. So I'll give you a second to read this because it's pretty information heavy, but it's a really good, concise plan that if you have a START in your classroom, again, you'll be able to deliver instruction with minimal behavioral problems, and all students are going to get what they need and their academic levels are going to be targeted. So in structure, the environment to promote positive behavior. So we're looking at the organization of your classroom and your routines. And teaching, you're teaching the expected and positive behavior. So these are things that you have to teach to your students. You can't expect them to already know it. You have to teach it to them. Acknowledge, these are the positive behaviors that you're going to acknowledge and reinforce in your classroom. Respond, how do you respond to positive, to problem behaviors? What do you do when a behavior comes up during instruction? And then team, how do you work with others to solve the problem if a behavior comes up? Utilizing your team members as support. And your team members, again, are anybody that works in the academic setting that's in that building with you, as well as your parents. They're also a part of the team. And then lastly, I saw this really cool classroom management pyramid. It is not as clear as I wanted it to be, but I thought that it was very cool because we have some visual learners out there that are going to need to see it presented in this manner. So if you notice, it starts from the bottom, and when it comes to learning or supporting your students with classroom management, you have first the caring community. So making sure again that you build community within your classroom so that everyone understands that as a part of the community, if they do something to affect the community, it's their behavior is not just about them, it's the class overall. So once you establish your community, if you do something to affect the community, what are some recovery methods? So how is the teacher going to support that student in learning and finding coping mechanisms to help them evaluate their behavior and to not repeat it? And then you go up to long-term support. So what are some things that we can put in place to assist a student, like check-ins, ensuring that they have goals, helping them use I feel statements, helping them to become active listeners. And then if that doesn't work, we may need to have a separate space. So sometimes for the elementary level, that may be a student going to another classroom, that may be a student going to a cool down or calm down corner. For older students, they may be allowed to take a walk. They may be allowed to go to also chat with another teacher or a counselor. And then lastly, wraparound support. So the family, we have TDT counselors and are present in a lot of the buildings. We have other types of counselors that are present in the building. We're involving coaches, we're involving other teachers. We may need to bring in administration, but I thought that this is really cool to have a classroom management pyramid. So that way, again, for our visual learners, they may be able to understand it a little better. Next, so now that we have our classroom management plan, which again is our overview, these are some of the strategies that may go into your classroom management plan to help support classroom management. So first, we're going to establish clear expectations and clear communication. So you have to ensure that you're very, very clear on what good behavior looks like. What are the rules? What are the routines for your classroom? And this starts day one from the beginning of the school year. How you start is how you finish. And then once you establish that, make sure that you maintain open and clear communication with your students. Any concern that comes up, you need to address it promptly. And you also need to listen to their perspective because you want to ensure that students feel heard and that they feel like they have a voice in the classroom. Second, build positive relationships with students. So it's really important that they trust you and that you show that you trust them. So work to build that positive relationship with them, and that'll help your overall classroom environment. Using positive reinforcements. You have to acknowledge and reward positive behavior. And then you have to encourage students to repeat those behaviors, because everyone wants to be acknowledged. So if you're acknowledging that that student was raising their hand, that they came into the classroom, they put their folder up, then other students are going to see that and they're going to want to get that same acknowledgement. So they're going to follow suit. So if we have a whole classroom that's being acknowledged, that equals an effective classroom where you can get teaching and learning done. Create a structured environment. What does your space look like? How are your chairs arranged in your classroom? How are your centers arranged? Is it neat? Is it clean? What does a student feel when they walk into your classroom? That assists with how your students navigate through the classroom. That assists with you being able to stay on target with your schedule for activities in the classroom. That allows you to have smooth transitions throughout the classroom as well as in and out of the classroom. And it also minimizes distraction. Consistent consequences and fair and transparent policies. So whatever your consequence is, you have to stick with it, okay? So you have to be consistent for your consequences for positive and negative behavior. So that goes back to acknowledging the positive behavior. Students thrive on predictability. They want to know specifically what you're going to do, and that will guide what they're going to do. So you have to be consistent. And then you want to be fair. Make sure that the rules are fair and equitable for everyone. And again, over communicating is best in this scenario. So make sure you're clearly communicating and everyone understands. So day one, day two of your students coming in your classroom, you're communicating these expectations. You're also getting feedback from them about what they feel like some of the expectations should be, what some of the consequences should be for positive and negative behavior. And then after you do that, you constantly reinforce daily throughout the rest of the year what your expectations are. Varied instructional strategies. So you have various learners in your classroom. You have kinesthetic learners, you have visual learners, you have audio learners. So you need to ensure that your instructional strategies match those learners. Make sure that you do different things to accommodate those learning styles, and that will eliminate those behaviors because they're learning and they're learning the way that they can learn. Use of nonverbal cues and establishing a signal system. So develop nonverbal cues to redirect behavior. Our face is a big nonverbal cue. Our body language and our disposition, that will tell a student what it is that they should be doing next. That will let them know when you're pleased and when you're not pleased. And you don't have to disrupt your lesson to do it. Just use a nonverbal cue. Also developing and using signals to gain the attention of the whole class. That's traditionally in elementary school, sometimes middle school. But when you have the signal, it helps you flow through the lesson. It also helps signal transitions or changes in activities. Self-regulation, helping your students gain strategies for self-regulation and conflict resolution. How can they cope? How can they manage their own behavior? If you teach them these self-regulation strategies, they'll be able to self-correct before you get to them, which will help them to quickly bounce back. And that'll help you to eliminate any unnecessary distractions in your lesson. And it'll also give you an opportunity to encourage that student to teach that strategy to another student, which again will in turn help you to have better management of your classroom. Flexible seating options. So allow for students to have more than just the traditional seating options. You may have the rolly chairs, you may have the bouncy chairs that move back and forth. But again, the seating option is not for play, it's for learning. So there are some students that may need to be in a rolly chair because of the system with how they learn. All of your flexible seating options should be rooted in the student's learning style. Incorporate technology thoughtfully. So this is a technology generation. So when you are teaching, find things that you can do, activities that you can incorporate technology to support students' learning. Make sure that when you incorporate this technology, whether it's a laptop, it's a cell phone, if you're using the Promethean board, whatever you're using technology-wise, you need to have very clear guidelines for use for the classroom. Again, this is a learning tool. It's not for play. And this is something that we're utilizing to help our students be able to further comprehend the level of instruction that we're trying to disseminate. Regular check-ins. Make sure you're checking in with your students. You can do it in many forms. You can have student conferences. You can check in with them during recess. You can check in with them at lunch. You can check in with them while students are doing independent work or stations. But make sure that you talk to your students one-on-one. Talk about their progress. How are you doing? What are you concerned about? How can I help? How can I support? This also helps to build supportive relationships. So if you're taking the time to ask me, what are my concerns? How am I learning? I feel like I'm heard. I feel like I'm valued. So make sure that you take time to check in with your students regularly. We talked about this a little earlier with elementary students, a calm down corner. This could be a cool little space where students can go to calm down, get their composure, and regroup. I've seen it done many ways. I've seen a tent in a classroom where they can climb in the tent where it's lots of soft pillows and squishy things, and they can just take a breather where they're kind of away from their classmates, the tent closed, and they can get their thoughts together. I've seen where it's just a little chair with a partition where you can go and you can write your thoughts and your feelings. There are several ways that you can do it, but make sure that your students have a way to be able to a clear policy for how they get to the calm down corner. If you need it, this is what you do, and then there are clear guidelines for what is done in the calm down corner and a time limit established. You cannot be in the calm down corner all day. What's the time limit? How long do you have to calm down? Is it 5 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? And then what are you doing while you're in that calm down corner? Professional development. Make sure you stay on top of teaching strategies, research, things that are coming out about what it is that you're doing. There are lots of professional development activities out there and different professional development organizations that you can join. I'd recommend that you join, if you're not a part of the National Education Association and the Virginia Education Association. They send out a publication monthly with lots of different articles about things that are happening in education. Also, the Virginia Department of Education has a teacher newsletter, the Teacher Direct, that goes out, and it has lots of good information. So stay up to date with what's going on in the field. Remember, every classroom is different. Every year, your students are going to be different. So what worked year one may not work year two. So take some time to figure out the strategies that work best for your group of kids, because you also will change as you grow in your teaching career. It's really important and essential to be flexible, and you have to be willing to adjust your approach based on the evolving needs of your class. I always recommend some type of literature. This time, I'm recommending a book called Teach Like a Pirate, Dave Burgess. And when he's talking about teaching like a pirate, there are several different instructional strategies that he talks about in his book. So the pirate is P, passion, I, immersion, R, rapport, A, ask analysis, T, transformation, and E, enthusiasm. So if you have an opportunity, check out this book, Teach Like a Pirate. Lastly, we believe in you. You got this. We got this because we're all a team.